left off, my machine shut down, so let's get through this lesson. Whether you choose to write it like this or you choose to write it with x minus 2 squared, that's the same thing. I guess I would prefer squaring it, just takes up less room, but that's completely up to you. Okay, so that's one. Take a look at the second one. All right, we got a 2x to the third minus x squared minus 15. Can we take something out? Yes, we can. We can take an x out. We do that, we get 2x squared minus x minus 15. Okay, so we are back to, can we factor that? And whether you choose to use grouping or you choose to guess and check, hopefully we should be able to factor this. I'm going to get a 2x and an x, looking for product of 15, so 3 and 5 probably. We do have the 15 and 1. Remember, one of these is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. I need a negative 1 when I combine them, and one of my numbers has got to be multiplied by this 2. So let's see. I know. We're going to do a 3 here and a 5 here, because that's 2x squared minus 6x plus 5x, which gives me a negative 1. So there is my factor. Now, I did it with guess and check. Feel free to do it with the where you find the common products, and then you do with grouping, and you fill that in. That's fine. You should get the same answer I get. I'm giving you some time so you can catch up if you chose to do that method, or you could pause me and double check. All right. Remember, always double check your answers, because you can do that. You can multiply it out to make sure you get what they give you, and if not, you're not right. Okay. The other thing is, if you graph it on a graphing calculator, which you all have with the Desmos calculator app, you should be able to, the x-axis, where it crosses the x-axis, it should be your solutions. Okay, so we're going to keep going. We are going to keep these methods going, and we're actually going to solve them. Okay, how do we solve a perfect square? All right, let's look. We have solved where we set each one equal to 0. So let's talk about that. Right here, let's factor. It's equal to 0. I believe it's a perfect square because I got 4x and 4x, and I have plus 1 and plus 1. So I have 4x plus 1 twice, set each one equal to 0. Going to be the same answer. Minus 1 and divide by 4. And x equals negative 1/4. I'm going to get the same answer. I actually have negative 1/4 as 2 possible roots, 2 possible answers, and that would be right. Okay, now let's try this one. Same thing. It looks like a perfect square. I know it's got a fraction in there, but remember, 4 is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square. Square root of that would be 2/3. And y? Well, 2/3 y and 2/3 y would be 4/3. So adding fractions is a little bit different. It is a perfect square. It is minus 2/3 twice. Set each one equal to 0, which honestly I'm just going to do it once because I'm going to get the same answer. And y is 2/3. Y equals 2/3. That means, or sorry, y equals. That means that's what your the x-intercept is if you were to graph it. Okay, we can also, if it's a perfect square, we can also solve it without setting it equal to 0. Check out this right here. If it was x squared minus 16, we'd add the 16 over here, and we'd get x squared equals 16. How do you undo that? Well, you take the square root. The thing about this to remember is that there are 2 answers. X could be a positive 4 or a negative 4, because both of them squared will give you positive 16. So you still have 2 roots, all right? So we can actually solve a perfect square polynomial like this. Let's look at this example down here. See how it's a squared binomial equals a constant? We can undo the square by taking the square root. The thing to remember when we do that is that we have 2 answers. We have x minus 2 equals a positive 2/3, and x minus 2 equals a negative 2/3. And then when we add the two, I mean, it'd be easier if I didn't give you a fraction one, but so x equals 2 2/3, and when we add the two, x equals 1 1/3. Okay, so those are my two possible roots. Now, that works out when it comes out nicely, but if you don't have a perfect square over there, when I take the square root of this to undo my squared term, I get x plus 1 equals the square root of 10, and x plus 1 equals the negative square root of 10. I'm going to leave it the square root of 10, because if I punch that in my calculator, I get an irrational number. So just to keep it nice and pretty, I'm going to leave it like that. And I'm going to get two answers, and you're not going to like this, but trust me, it's easier. When I subtract 1, this is what my answer looks like. X equals negative 1 plus the square root of 10, and x equals negative 1 minus the square root of 10. And as ugly as those two expressions are, they are easier to look at than if I were to put that in my calculator and get negative 1 minus the square root of 10, which is negative 16227, blah, 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 and negative 1, oops, sorry, that's the wrong answer because I subtracted it, so that would be this, negative 1.1622 something. Over here, negative 1 plus the square root of 10, which is 2.16227, Ugly. This, believe it or not, is easier, and later in algebra, we're going to be dealing with those. So get used to that radical in there. It'll be okay. So this is an appropriate answer, and I strongly suggest you write the answers like that, not an approximation. Okay? Let's keep working on these. On the back page, we have a word problem, and looky there. That good old equation comes back. Okay, a ball is dropped from a height of 35 feet, so that's your initial height. The formula is h equals negative 16t squared. There's no initial velocity, that's why the v is not in here, okay? And it can be used to approximate the number of seconds it takes to reach height 0 from initial height h sub 0. Find the time it takes to reach the ground. In other words, to reach 0. So we're going to take this expression, h equals negative 16t squared plus the initial feet of 35, and we're going to set it equal to 0. All right, how do we factor that? Actually, we don't have to. I'm just going to, now, usually I would say move your number over here, but because 16 is negative, I'm going to add that one over here. Plus 16t squared. And I get 16t squared equals 35. Is it 35? It is. Okay. Divide by 16. And t squared equals 35 over 16. And when I take the square root, I'm going to get a positive and a negative answer. So the square root of 35 over 16, positive, and 35 over 16, negative. Now, we can kind of throw out the negative because in terms of time, that doesn't exist, right? So this, and I'm just going to punch that in. It's the square root of 35 over 16. Close my parentheses and punch it in. And I'm going to give you an approximation time because I'm just going to go 5 seconds. And that is where you are at. Okay, I can throw out the negative one because negative doesn't make sense. But usually there's a positive and a negative answer. Okay, so your assignment is on this sheet I'm going to hand out to you. It should be in ivory color. Now, again, I know I'm giving you lots of, I'm only giving you odds, but guys, if you want to practice factoring, please, please, please do the evens. I'll give you the answers, and you can see if you're doing them right, okay? There are some that are prime. Actually, of the odds, 2. There are 2 that are prime that you cannot factor. So over here, 2 prime. All right? Get going. Come see me if you have questions. Remember, our test will be on Wednesday the 20th as of now. I don't see any snow in the forecast, but you never know. It's South Dakota. All right? Good luck, guys.